The water reached her waist now, cold spring runoff soaking through the layers of her traveling dress until the fabric clung to her skin like a second shadow. And Georgiana Foster knew this was either the smartest or stupidest thing she had ever done in her 22 years of living. It was April of 1878, and White River, South Dakota had looked promising from the stagecoach window just 2 hours earlier. All weathered storefronts and false-fronted buildings clustered along a main street that dissolved into prairie grass and endless sky. She had come here with a carpet bag full of carefully folded dresses, $300 she had saved working as a seamstress in Philadelphia, and a burning need to disappear from the life her father had planned for her. The letter accepting her application to teach at the White River schoolhouse was tucked safely in her bag at the riverbank. But that felt like another lifetime now, before she had realized the stagecoach driver had taken her money and left her trunk at the wrong stop, 40 miles back. The river bottom was smooth stone beneath her boots, and she took another careful step forward, arms outstretched for balance. She was not trying to drown herself, despite how it might appear. She was trying to retrieve the ridiculous hat that had blown off her head 10 minutes ago, the one with the blue ribbon her sister had tied on the morning Georgiana left home. It was floating just beyond her reach, spinning lazily in an eddy near a half-submerged log. "Deep enough yet, or should I come get you?" The voice carried across the water with an easy drawl, tinged with amusement and something warmer, and Georgiana's head snapped up so fast her carefully pinned hair nearly came loose. A man sat astride a roan horse on the far bank, one leg hooked casual around the saddle horn, hat pushed back just enough that she could see dark hair, and a face that the afternoon sun threw into sharp relief. He looked young, maybe her age or a few years older, with the kind of lean build that came from hard work rather than soft living. "I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs," she called back, trying for dignity even as her teeth started to chatter. The water was truly cold, snowmelt from somewhere up in the Black Hills probably, and her fingers had gone numb where they clutched handfuls of sodden skirt. "Did not say you were not capable, miss. Just offering assistance to a lady who appears to be wading into the White River in her Sunday best." He swung his leg back over and dismounted in one smooth motion, ground tying his horse with the kind of unconscious competence that spoke to years in the saddle. "That is, unless you make a habit of taking your constitutional in full dress, in which case I apologize for the interruption." Despite everything, despite the cold and the exhaustion and the way her carefully constructed plans were unraveling like cheap thread, Georgiana felt a smile tug at her mouth. "My hat blew away." "Ah." He walked to the water's edge and she could see him better now. He was clean-shaven, unusual for this territory where most men wore beards, with gray eyes that held both mischief and genuine concern. His clothes were working gear, worn denim and a leather vest, but clean and well-maintained. A revolver rode his hip in a holster that showed honest wear. "And that hat is worth catching your death over. It has sentimental value." Sentimental value. He seemed to consider this, then without warning started unlacing his boots. "Well then, I suppose I cannot let a lady lose something with sentimental value on my watch." "Your watch?" "I do not even know you." "Yates Dalton," he said, pulling off one boot and then the other. "And now you do." He waded in without hesitation, not even flinching at the cold, moving through the current with the sure-footed confidence of someone who knew this river well. He was beside her in moments, close enough that she could see water droplets caught in his dark hair, close enough to smell horse and leather and something indefinably male. "Let me guess. New in town. Stagecoach left you at the crossing. You got turned around trying to find the main road and ended up here instead." Georgiana blinked. How did you know? Because the crossing is 2 miles upstream, and everyone who gets left there instead of in town proper makes the same walk. He reached past her, arm extending, and snagged the hat from where it bobbed against the log. Water streamed from the brim as he held it up, the blue ribbon hanging limp and sad. Also because I have never seen you before, and I know pretty much everyone within 20 miles of White River. Thank you. She took the hat, clutching it to her chest, suddenly very aware that they were standing alone in a river, that her dress was plastered to her body in a way that was deeply improper, that this man, this stranger, was looking at her with an expression she could not quite name. Not improper interest, exactly, but something more complicated. Something that made her breath catch for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. We should get you out before you freeze, Yates said, and his voice had gone softer, the teasing edge replaced with something almost gentle. Can you walk? Of course I can walk. Then why are you still standing here? It was a fair question. Georgiana realized her legs had started shaking, muscles trembling from cold and exertion and probably delayed shock from the entire disastrous day. I suppose I am colder than I thought. She did not protest when Yates took her elbow, steadying her as they made their way back toward shore. The current pushed against her sodden skirts, trying to pull her downstream, but his grip was sure and strong. They climbed the bank together, water streaming from their clothes, and the April wind bit through wet fabric like knives. Here. Yates shrugged out of his vest and draped it around her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, lined with sheepskin that felt like heaven against her chilled skin. My horse is just there. Where are you trying to get to? The schoolhouse. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. I am the new teacher, or I am supposed to be. I sent a telegram from Rapid City saying I would arrive today. But my trunk is somewhere near Buffalo Gap, and I have no idea where the schoolhouse actually is, and I must look absolutely insane. Little bit, Yates agreed, but he was grinning, and something about that grin made the entire awful day feel less overwhelming. But the good kind of insane. The kind that goes after a hat in a freezing river because it means something. He gathered up his boots and walked barefoot to his horse, pulling a blanket from behind the saddle. Schoolhouse is a mile from here, right on the main street. Cannot miss it. But first we need to get you warm and dry, or you will catch pneumonia before you teach your first lesson. I cannot just go into town looking like this. No, Yates agreed. My mother would have my hide if I brought you to town in wet clothes, but our ranch is just over that rise. Mother keeps a lending wardrobe for situations exactly like this. Well, maybe not exactly like this. I do not think we have had too many teachers wade into the White River, but close enough. Georgiana knew she should protest. She should insist on going straight to town, on maintaining proper appearances, on not following a strange man to his family's ranch even if he did have kind eyes and a smile that made her forget to be cold. But her teeth were chattering too hard to argue, and besides, what choice did she have? She was soaked through, stranded and rapidly losing the ability to feel her toes. That is very kind of your mother, she managed. She is a kind woman. Yates mounted his horse, then reached down. Come on up. Blaze here is steady as a rock and it is not far. She took his hand, let him pull her up behind the saddle. It was awkward with her wet skirts, scandalous probably, and she had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from sliding off. She could feel the warmth of him through his damp shirt, the solid muscle of his back, the steady rhythm of his breathing. The horse moved beneath them in an easy walk, and despite everything, Georgiana felt something unknot in her chest. Thank you, she said quietly, for helping me. You did not have to. Sure I did. Yates half turned in the saddle to look back at her, and she was close enough to see gold flecks in those gray eyes. What kind of man would I be if I left a lady standing in a river? The kind most men were, Georgiana thought but did not say. The kind her father was, all business and contracts and arrangements that suited him. The kind the man her father wanted her to marry was, wealthy and respectable and so boring she wanted to scream. She had fled Philadelphia because she could not breathe there anymore, could not stomach one more dinner party where she was displayed like a prize mare, could not face a future of suffocating respectability. And now here she was, soaking wet and half frozen, riding behind a cowboy she had known for all of 15 minutes, and she felt more alive than she had in years. The Dalton Ranch appeared over a gentle rise, a sprawling collection of buildings that spoke to years of hard work and careful planning. The main house was 2 stories, whitewashed wood with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Barns and corrals spread out behind it, and she could see horses moving in the paddocks, their coats gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Chickens scattered as they rode into the yard, and a dog came bounding up, all wagging tail in excitement. "Mother," Yates called as he dismounted, then reached up to help Georgiana down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit solid ground and his hands went to her waist, steadying her. "Mother, we need the lending wardrobe." The front door opened, and a woman emerged wiping her hands on an apron. She was perhaps 50, with dark hair liberally streaked with gray and the same gray eyes as her son. Those eyes took in the scene with one swift glance. Her soaking wet son, the even wetter young woman in his vest, the general air of disaster. "Yates Michael Dalton, what have you done?" "Nothing. I fished her out of the White River, that is all." "That is all," he says. But the woman was already moving, coming down the porch steps with purpose. "You poor dear, come inside this instant. Yates, you get those wet clothes off before you track water through my house, and then you see to that horse. Go on now." Georgiana found herself swept up the steps and into a warm kitchen that smelled like bread and coffee, and something wonderful baking in the cast iron stove. The sudden heat made her shiver even harder, teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. "Margaret Dalton," the woman said briskly, already working at the buttons of Georgiana's ruined dress. "And you are Georgiana Foster, the new teacher. Well, Miss Foster, welcome to White River, though I imagine you hoped for a warmer reception." Margaret got the dress unbuttoned and peeled the sodden fabric away, clicking her tongue at the state of the undergarments beneath. "Everything off, dear. I will get you something dry. There is a screen there and towels on the chair." Georgiana obeyed numbly, stripping down to her skin behind the decorative screen in the corner of the kitchen. Her fingers were so cold she could barely manage the laces and buttons. Margaret reappeared with an armful of clothes and more towels, reaching around the screen to hand them over. "These belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to Sioux Falls. Should fit you well enough. Take your time getting warm." The clothes were simple but well made. A cotton chemise and drawers, a petticoat, and a dress in a soft gray blue that reminded Georgiana of storm clouds. There were stockings, too, hand-knit and thick, and a shawl of cream-colored wool. She dried herself as best she could and dressed slowly, feeling returning to her limbs along with a bone-deep exhaustion. When she emerged from behind the screen, Margaret had coffee poured and waiting, along with thick slices of bread with butter and jam. "Sit," she commanded, and Georgiana sat. The coffee was strong and sweet, the bread still warm, and she thought she might actually survive this day after all. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Dalton. I do not know what I would have done if your son had not come along. Probably would have retrieved your hat and walked to town to scandalize everyone with your wet dress. Margaret said with a smile that transformed her stern face into something beautiful. Yates said you are the new teacher. We have been waiting for someone to take that position. The last teacher left in January when her father fell ill back east. I am supposed to start Monday. Georgiana wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. But my trunk is missing, and I have not even seen the schoolhouse yet, and I cannot imagine what the school board will think when they hear I went wading into the river on my first day in town. They will think you are human, Margaret said firmly. And if they have any sense, they will be grateful to have someone willing to teach their children. Though I admit, fishing your hat out of the White River is perhaps not the most conventional introduction to our community. The back door opened and Yates came in, changed into dry clothes, his hair still damp and curling slightly at the edges. His eyes went straight to Georgiana, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. Feeling better? Much. Thank you again. Yates, I need you to ride into town and let Reverend Michaels know Miss Foster is here and safe, Margaret said. He is heading up the school board this year. And stop by the general store and tell Agnes we will need to arrange for some supplies for Miss Foster until her trunk arrives. I can pay, Georgiana said quickly. I have money. No one doubts that, dear, but you are new here and we take care of our own in White River. Consider it a welcome. Margaret refilled her coffee cup. In fact, I think you should stay here tonight. The teacherage behind the schoolhouse has been closed up all winter. It will need airing out and cleaning before it is fit for occupation. I could not possibly impose. It is not an imposition if I am offering. Besides, I would enjoy the company. My husband is up in the northern pastures with our hired men checking the fence lines, and Yates is barely here most days. It will be nice to have another woman in the house. Margaret gave her son a pointed look. And you will ride into town now, please. Yes, madam. But Yates was looking at Georgiana again, and she found she could not look away. I am glad you are all right, Miss Foster. That was quite a scare. Please call me Georgiana. After you have pulled me from a river, I think we can dispense with excessive formality. His smile was slow and devastating. Georgiana it is. Though I have to say, for a school teacher, you are considerably more adventurous than I expected. What did you expect? Someone older, someone stern, someone who definitely would not wade into a river for a hat. He grabbed his own hat from the peg by the door, settling it on his head with a casual gesture that should not have been as attractive as it was. I will be back in a few hours. Try not to go swimming again while I am gone. I will do my best, she said dryly, and was rewarded with a laugh that stayed with her long after he rode away. Margaret kept her busy for the rest of the afternoon, feeding her more food than she could possibly eat, showing her around the house, telling stories about White River and its inhabitants. Georgiana learned that the town had been established 12 years ago, in 1866, just after the war, by a group of families looking for fresh starts and open land. The Daltons had been among the first settlers, claiming this stretch of prairie and river bottom when there was nothing here but grass and hope. It has been good land to us, Margaret said as they sat on the porch watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Hard sometimes, especially those first winters, but good. Yates was born here, delivered during a blizzard by a Dakota woman who was the only person brave enough to travel in that storm. He is our only child, though we wanted more, but the good Lord had other plans. He seems like a good man, Georgiana ventured. He is. Margaret's voice was warm with pride. Works hard, treats people fairly, has never given us a moment's trouble, though I will not lie to you, dear. I have been hoping he might find someone and settle down properly. He is 25 now, and most of his friends are married with children already. Georgiana felt her cheeks warm. Mrs. Dalton, I only just met him. I know, but a mother notices things, and I noticed the way he looked at you. Margaret patted her hand. I am not pushing, mind you. Just observing. Before Georgiana could respond, the sound of hoofbeats drew their attention. Yates was back, riding up the drive as the sky turned orange and pink behind him. He dismounted and climbed the porch steps, settling into the chair across from them with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. Reverend Michaels said to tell you welcome, and he will call on you tomorrow at the schoolhouse. Agnes is putting together a basket of necessities to be delivered first thing in the morning, and half the town now knows the new teacher went for an unexpected swim. He grinned at Georgiana's horrified expression. Do not worry, they think it is charming. Bessie Whitcomb, who runs the cafe, said anyone brave enough to fish out a hat in that cold water is brave enough to handle her youngest son, who is apparently something of a terror in the classroom. Wonderful, Georgiana said weakly. I have not even started teaching, and I already have a reputation. Could be worse. At least they are not saying you are boring. Small mercies. They ate dinner together around the big kitchen table, roast chicken and potatoes and vegetables from the root cellar, everything seasoned with Margaret's careful hand. Yates told stories about the ranch, about horses and cattle and the rhythm of life on the prairie. Georgiana found herself laughing more than she had in months, the tension she had carried from Philadelphia slowly unwinding. After dinner, Margaret shooed them both out onto the porch while she cleaned up, despite Georgiana's protests that she should help. You have had a long day. Go sit and watch the stars come out. They are something special here. So Georgiana found herself on the porch swing, Yates settling beside her with enough space to be proper but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cooling night air. The sky was enormous here, bigger than any sky she had ever seen, and as darkness fell the stars began to appear, first a few and then hundreds, thousands, an impossible field of light. I have never seen anything like this, she breathed. One of the benefits of living where there are more cattle than people, Yates said. In town you can see them pretty well, but out here, with no other lights, it is something else entirely. He was quiet for a moment and then, why did you come here, Georgiana? A woman like you, educated from a city. White River is about as far from Philadelphia as you can get without falling off the edge of the earth. Maybe that was the point, she said softly. I needed to be somewhere different, somewhere I could breathe. Your family did not want you to come. My father most definitely did not. He had plans for me. A suitable marriage to a suitable man with a suitable fortune. Very suitable, very suffocating. She pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders. I am his only surviving child. My two brothers died in the war and my mother died when I was 16. He wanted to keep me safe, I think, but his version of safety felt like a cage. So when I saw the advertisement for a teacher in South Dakota, I applied, and when they accepted, I left. Was he angry, furious? He said I was throwing my life away, that I would end up alone and desperate in some God-forsaken wilderness, that no respectable man would want me after I had lived among cowboys and Indians. She laughed, but it had a bitter edge. He meant it as a warning, but it sounded like freedom to me. Yates was quiet, and when he spoke his voice was thoughtful. My father came west after the war. He never talks much about it, but I know he saw terrible things. Lost friends. Lost something of himself, maybe. And when he came here to this empty land, he found it again. Or found something new to replace what was lost. He looked at her, and in the starlight his face was all plains and shadows. Sometimes running away is the bravest thing you can do. Is that what you think I am doing? Running away? I think you are running toward something. There is a difference. They sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently as it moved. Somewhere out in the darkness a coyote called and another answered. The sound should have been lonely, but instead it felt like a promise, like a door opening onto something vast and unknown. "What about you?" Georgiana asked. "Have you always lived here, born in that house, never lived anywhere else?" "Though I spent a year in Cheyenne learning horse training from a man who worked with the cavalry, that was enough city for me. I came back and swore I would never leave again." He stretched his legs out, boots scraping against the porch boards. "I know it is not sophisticated or exciting, but this land gets into you. The space, the sky, the way you can ride for hours and see nothing but grass and horizon. It makes you feel small and huge at the same time, if that makes any sense." "It does," Georgiana said, and realized she meant it. She had only been here a few hours, but already she could feel it, that sense of possibility, of room to breathe and grow and become something other than what had been planned for her. "You will do well here," Yates said quietly. "The children need a good teacher, and I think you are going to be a good teacher. You do not even know me. I know you went into a freezing river for a hat with a blue ribbon. I know you did not cry or panic when you were cold and lost and everything had gone wrong. I know you laugh easily and speak your mind and are not afraid of looking foolish if it means getting what you want." He turned to look at her full on, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I know enough." Margaret called from inside that she had prepared a room for Georgiana, breaking the moment. But as they stood and went inside, Yates caught her hand briefly, his fingers warm and calloused against hers. "I am glad you came to White River, Georgiana Foster." "So am I," she whispered, and meant it with her whole heart. The room Margaret had prepared was small but cozy, with a brass bed covered in quilts and a window that looked out over the prairie. Georgiana lay awake for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, thinking about gray eyes and gentle hands, and the way Yates had looked at her on the porch. She had come here to escape, to find independence, to prove she could make her own way. She had not expected to find this, whatever this was, that made her pulse race and her carefully laid plans feel suddenly flexible. She fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, about meeting the Reverend and seeing the schoolhouse and beginning the life she had chosen. But her dreams were full of rivers and starlight and a cowboy with a devastating smile. Morning came bright and clear, and Margaret had breakfast waiting when Georgiana came downstairs. Eggs and bacon and biscuits so light they practically floated off the plate. Yates was already gone, out checking the cattle, Margaret said, but he would be back to drive Georgiana into town after she met with the Reverend. "We could have one of the men drive her," Margaret had said when Yates volunteered the night before, but her eyes had been twinkling. "You have work to do." "Nothing that cannot wait a few hours," he had replied firmly, and that had been the end of it. True to his word, Yates appeared mid-morning, driving a buckboard wagon pulled by a handsome bay. He helped Georgiana up to the seat, and they set off down the rutted track toward town, the wagon bouncing over the uneven ground. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Surprisingly well, considering everything. Your mother is wonderful. This dress fits perfectly." She smoothed her hand over the skirt. "I will return it as soon as my trunk arrives. Keep it. Honestly, my sister has more clothes than she could wear in 3 lifetimes. She would be happy to know it went to someone who needed it." He guided the horses around a deep rut. "Nervous about meeting Reverend Michaels?" "Terrified," Georgiana admitted. "What if he decides I am not suitable? What if the school board rescinds their offer after hearing about yesterday? They will not. Trust me, we need a teacher too badly, and anyone who thinks you are not suitable based on one wet dress is not worth worrying about." His confidence was reassuring, even if Georgiana could not quite share it. But as they crested a low hill and White River came into view, she felt a flutter of excitement beneath the nervousness. The town looked bigger in daylight, more established than she had expected. The main street ran straight as an arrow, lined with businesses. A general store, a hotel, the cafe Yates had mentioned, a saddle shop, a blacksmith, a land office. At the far end stood a white church with a bell tower, and beside it, slightly set back, a small building that could only be the schoolhouse. People were out and about, and several stopped to stare as Yates drove past. He nodded and tipped his hat, completely unfazed by the attention, but Georgiana felt her cheeks warming. Everyone was looking at her, the new teacher, the woman who had gone swimming in her good dress on her first day in town. Yates pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the schoolhouse, a neat clapboard building with large windows and a small covered porch. A man was waiting there, tall and thin with silver hair and a kind face. He came down the steps as they arrived, smiling. "You must be Miss Foster." "I am Peter Michaels, the minister here and temporary school board chairman. Welcome to White River." Georgiana took his offered hand, trying to project competence despite feeling like an absolute fraud. "Thank you, Reverend. I apologize for my unconventional arrival yesterday." "Think nothing of it. These things happen." But his eyes were twinkling with poorly suppressed amusement. "Though I must say, your method of introducing yourself to our local geography has certainly made an impression. Half the town is already placing bets on how long you will last." "Betting I will leave, you mean? On the contrary, betting you will surprise us all." He gestured toward the schoolhouse. "Shall we take a look at your new domain?" The schoolhouse was a single large room with rows of wooden desks, a pot-bellied stove for heat, and a massive chalkboard across the front wall. Windows on both sides let in generous light, and there was a good-sized desk for the teacher. Behind the building, connected by a covered walkway, was the teacherage. 2 rooms, simply furnished but clean and private. "We closed it up for the winter after Miss Brennan left," Reverend Michaels explained as he showed her around. "But the ladies' auxiliary came through yesterday evening after Yates brought word you had arrived. They aired it out, made up the bed, and stocked the pantry with basics. You should be comfortable enough until your trunk arrives." This is more than comfortable. It is perfect. And it was. The main room had a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove for cooking and heat, and shelves for books. The second room was tiny, barely more than a closet, but it had space for a wardrobe and a washstand. It was simple and plain and absolutely hers in a way nothing in her father's Philadelphia mansion had ever been. "School starts Monday at 8 o'clock, Reverend Michaels continued. "You will have 23 students, ages 6 to 15. Most are from town families, but several ride in from surrounding ranches. We provide slates and basic supplies, but the older students are expected to bring their own paper and pencils. Curriculum is reading, writing, arithmetic, with history and geography as time allows. You will teach through mid-December, break for winter, and resume in March." It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. Georgiana had trained for this, had spent 2 years working as an assistant teacher in Philadelphia before applying for her own position. She knew she could do this. She wanted to do this. They discussed logistics for another hour, lesson plans, expectations, discipline policies. Reverend Michaels was practical and fair-minded, and by the time he left, Georgiana felt considerably more confident about the upcoming week. She stood on the schoolhouse porch, watching him walk back toward the church, and felt Yates come up beside her. "Well, I think I can do this." "I know you can." He leaned against the porch post, arms crossed, looking entirely too attractive in the midday sun. "What do you need?" "Everything," she admitted with a laugh. Clothes, books, supplies, furniture, sanity, not necessarily in that order. Agnes at the general store will have most of what you need, and I happen to know she is dying to meet you. Half the women in town are dying to meet you, actually. The other half already think they know everything about you and are busy spreading rumors. Wonderful. It is not malicious, just small-town life. Everyone knows everyone's business and they will gossip about it endlessly, but they will also show up with casseroles and help if you need it. Just the way things work here. He was right, Georgiana discovered over the next few hours. Agnes Whitmore, who ran the general store with her husband Frank, enveloped her in a hug the moment she walked through the door, and then proceeded to outfit her with everything from dish towels to a winter coat, refusing to discuss payment until Georgiana's trunk arrived. Bessie Whitcomb from the cafe came by with enough food to feed 6 people, along with her infamous youngest son Tommy, a freckled 8-year-old who eyed Georgiana with deep suspicion. "You going to be strict?" Tommy demanded. "I am going to be fair," Georgiana replied. "If you work hard and behave, we will get along fine." That is what the last teacher said, and then she cried when Billy Henderson put a snake in her desk. "Then I suppose it is fortunate I am not afraid of snakes." Tommy looked skeptical, but Bessie laughed. "I like you already. You need anything at all, you come find me. And do not let these children run wild over you. They will try." More women came as the afternoon wore on, bringing gifts and introductions and thinly veiled curiosity. Georgiana's head spun with names and faces, but everyone was genuinely welcoming, even the ones who eyed her city clothes with barely concealed doubt. Several mentioned how nice it was that Yates had rescued her, with meaningful looks that made Georgiana want to sink through the floor. "They think we are courting," she hissed at Yates when they had a moment alone. He had stayed the entire afternoon, carrying packages and making introductions and generally being helpful. "Are we?" He looked genuinely curious. "We only met yesterday, true. But I would like to court you if you are amenable, properly with your permission and everything." Georgiana stared at him. "You cannot be serious." "Why not?" "Because I just arrived. Because you do not know anything about me. Because I am here to teach, not to find a husband." "Fair enough. But those things are not mutually exclusive, are they?" He smiled at her confused expression. "Look, I am not proposing marriage. I am not even saying I am in love with you, though I will admit I am fairly well infatuated after watching you march into a freezing river for a hat. I am just saying I would like to get to know you better. Take you to the occasional dance or church social. Maybe go for a ride on Sunday afternoons. Nothing that would interfere with your teaching or your independence. Just time spent in pleasant company. That is courting. That is friendship, potentially leading to courting if we both find we are compatible. There is a difference." He tipped his hat to Mrs. Henderson, who was passing by with a basket of eggs and an obvious desire to eavesdrop. When she was out of earshot, he continued, "I like you, Georgiana. I like how brave you are and how you do not put on airs and how you smile when you think no one is watching. I would like the chance to see if you like me too. Beyond being grateful, I pulled you out of a river. And if you decide you are only here to teach and want nothing to do with cowboys and ranch life, I will respect that. But I would hate to not even try." He was sincere, Georgiana realized, completely, utterly sincere. And the worst part was she wanted to say yes. She wanted to spend more time with this man who made her laugh and feel safe and seen in a way no one ever had. But she had come here to be independent, to prove she did not need a man to define her life. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "That is fair. Take all the time you need." But he looked pleased, like he knew she would eventually say yes, and Georgiana realized he was probably right. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Georgiana spent Saturday organizing the schoolhouse, writing lessons on the chalkboard, arranging the desks into neat rows. Sunday she attended services at the church, enduring the whispers and stares with as much grace as she could muster. Reverend Michaels preached on new beginnings, which felt either perfectly appropriate or far too on the nose. Yates appeared after the service, freshly shaved and wearing a suit that made him look both civilized and wildly uncomfortable. "Mother insists I invite you to Sunday dinner at the ranch. She made pot roast. I should probably spend the afternoon preparing for tomorrow." "You can prepare this evening. Come on. You need to eat anyway, and Mother's pot roast is legendary. Besides, I have something to show you." She should have said no. She should have maintained proper boundaries and professional distance. But the thought of spending the afternoon alone in her teacherage, nervous about the next day, was suddenly unbearable. So she said yes, and let Yates help her into his wagon, and tried not to think about how right it felt. Dinner at the Dalton Ranch was warm and noisy and wonderful. Margaret presided over a table groaning with food. The promised pot roast along with potatoes and carrots and onions, fresh bread, 3 kinds of vegetables, and a pie that made Georgiana's mouth water just looking at it. Yates's father, Samuel, was there too, a weathered man with kind eyes and hands scarred from decades of ranch work. He shook Georgiana's hand with grave courtesy and told her he was pleased to meet anyone brave enough to teach the wild youth of White River. After dinner, Yates took her outside, grabbing a bridle from the barn before leading her out to the paddocks. A small herd of horses grazed in the evening light, and one, a pretty little mare the color of copper pennies, lifted her head and nickered when Yates whistled. "This is Penny," he said as the mare came over, pushing her nose into his hand looking for treats. "She is 3 years old, gentle as they come, and needs someone to ride her regularly or she gets fat and lazy. She is beautiful. She is yours if you want her. Consider it a loan. You will need a way to get around, and while you could rent a horse from the livery, that gets expensive. Penny needs the exercise and attention, and you need transportation. Seems like a good arrangement to me." Georgiana reached out tentatively, running her hand down the mare's sleek neck. "I have not ridden in years, not since I was a girl. It comes back, and Penny is forgiving. She would much rather walk than run, and she has never spooked at anything in her life. I trained her myself." He held out the bridle. "Want to try?" They spent the next hour in the paddock, Yates walking her through the basics while Penny stood patient and calm. Georgiana's muscles remembered more than she expected, and by the time the sun was setting, she had managed a full circle of the enclosure at a slow walk, feeling absurdly proud of herself. "See, natural," Yates said, helping her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and when she looked up, he was close enough that she could see the darker ring around his gray irises. "You will do fine tomorrow. The children are going to love you. How can you possibly know that?" "Because you are the kind of person people love. You just do not know it yet." He stepped back, breaking the moment, and Georgiana felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed. "Come on. I will drive you back to town before it gets full dark." That night, lying in her new bed in her new home, Georgiana thought about everything that had happened since she stepped off that stagecoach 3 days ago. She had been terrified then, unsure if she was making a terrible mistake. Now she felt something else. Anticipation, excitement, and underneath it all, a growing certainty that she had made exactly the right choice. Monday morning dawned clear and cold. Georgiana dressed carefully in one of the dresses Agnes had insisted she take, a sensible dark blue cotton that marked her as a teacher. She pinned her hair up severely, trying for authority, and walked the short distance to the schoolhouse with her heart pounding. The children were already arriving, delivered by parents who eyed her with frank curiosity. She greeted each family, learning names and faces, accepting the scrutiny with as much composure as she could manage. Tommy Whitcomb arrived looking rebellious, along with the infamous Billy Henderson, a tall boy of about 14 who eyed her with the kind of calculation that suggested he was already planning his first challenge. At 8 o'clock exactly, Georgiana rang the bell, and the children filed inside. 23 students, just as Reverend Michaels had promised, ranging from little Sarah Thompson, who was barely 6 to Billy, and 2 other 14-year-olds who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. She took her place at the front of the room, surveying her new charges, and felt a flutter of pure terror. "Good morning. My name is Miss Foster, and I am your new teacher." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I know some of you are wondering about me, about where I came from and whether I will be any good at this job. I am from Philadelphia, which I am sure sounds impossibly far away and foreign. I came here because I wanted to teach, because I believe education is important and that all of you deserve the chance to learn and grow and become whoever you want to be. I am going to work hard to be a good teacher. In return, I expect you to work hard to be good students. That means respect, effort, and honesty. Can we all agree to that?" Silence. 23 pairs of eyes stared at her. Then Sarah Thompson, sitting in the front row with her feet dangling above the floor, raised her hand. "Yes, Sarah. Is it true you went swimming in the river in your fancy dress?" A ripple of giggles spread through the room. Georgiana felt her cheeks warm but made herself smile. "It is true I waded into the river. I was not swimming exactly. My hat blew off and it had sentimental value, so I went to get it. It was cold and rather foolish, but sometimes we do foolish things for items we care about. Does that answer your question?" Sarah nodded solemnly. "My mama said anyone brave enough to go in that cold water is brave enough to handle us. Is that true? I suppose we will find out together, won't we?" That broke the tension. The children laughed, and Georgiana saw some of the suspicion fade from their faces. Billy Henderson still looked skeptical, but he was no longer glaring, which she counted as a victory. The day was long and exhausting and wonderful. She divided the students into groups by age and ability, rotating between teaching reading to the youngest, arithmetic to the middle group, and history to the oldest. She broke up 2 arguments, confiscated a slingshot, and had to stop Tommy Whitcomb from putting ink in Emily Parker's braids. By the time 3 o'clock came and she dismissed them, she was utterly wrung out, but also exhilarated. She had done it. She had survived her first day. More than survived. Several of the younger children had hugged her goodbye, and even Billy had grudgingly admitted the history lesson on the Revolutionary War had been not completely terrible, which she suspected was high praise from him. She was sitting at her desk, working on lesson plans for the next day, when a knock came at the door. Yates leaned in, hat in hand, looking somehow both tentative and confident. "How did it go?" "I did not cry. No one put a snake in my desk, and Billy Henderson only rolled his eyes at me 7 times instead of constantly. I am calling it a success." "That is definitely a success." He came inside, looking around at the neat rows of desks, the carefully written lessons on the board. "I am impressed. This looks like a real school." "It is a real school. You know what I mean. It looks like someone who knows what they are doing runs it." He perched on the edge of a desk in the front row, his long legs stretched out. "I brought Penny. Figured you might want to ride her home instead of walking. Get used to her. I have a home 200 feet away. I do not need a horse for that. but you might want to ride out to the Jacobson place on Wednesday to check on their youngest girl. She has been sick and missed today. It is about 3 miles east. Or to the Henderson Ranch on Friday for Billy's supplies he always forgets. Or just out on the prairie on Sunday afternoon, because it is beautiful and you deserve to see more of this territory than just the town and my family's ranch. You have an answer for everything, do you not? Not everything, but I am working on it. He smiled, and Georgiana felt her resolve weakening. She had been trying all day not to think about him, focusing on her students and her responsibilities. But now here he was, making her pulse race with just a smile, and she realized she was fighting a losing battle. I have not said yes to courting. I know, I am being patient. This is patient for me, incredibly patient. Normally, when I want something, I go after it directly. But you are not a horse to be trained or a fence to be mended. You are a woman who gets to make her own choices, so I am waiting until you are ready to choose. He stood, settling his hat back on his head. But I am still going to leave Penny tied up outside, because whether we are courting or not, you need a horse. And I am still going to check on you, because that is what neighbors do. And I am still going to hope you eventually say yes, because I meant what I said Sunday. I like you, Georgiana Foster, more than I have liked anyone in a very long time. He left before she could respond, and Georgiana sat at her desk for a long moment, staring at the door. Then she got up, walked outside, and found Penny tied to the porch rail, her copper coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. The mare turned to look at her, dark eyes patient and kind. I suppose you are mine now, Georgiana said softly, running her hand down the silky neck. He is very persistent, your owner. Penny nickered softly, as if in agreement, and Georgiana laughed despite herself. She untied the lead rope and walked the mare around to the tiny lean-to barn behind the teacherage, settling her in with hay and water. It felt good to have something to care for, some living creature that depended on her. The weeks settled into a rhythm. She taught all day, planned lessons in the evening, and slowly got to know her students and their families. Several mothers invited her to tea, curious about the new teacher and probably hoping to gather gossip. She handled their questions with careful diplomacy, neither encouraging nor discouraging speculation about her and Yates. But he kept appearing, casual and helpful, making it impossible to maintain distance. He fixed the loose board on her porch without being asked. He brought fresh vegetables from his mother's garden. He rode with her out to the Jacobson place to check on little Emma, who was recovering from influenza, and delighted to receive the assignments Georgiana had prepared. On Thursday, there was a dance at the town hall, and half of White River turned out. Georgiana had planned to skip it, but Margaret Dalton appeared at her door with a dress borrowed from the infamous sister, a soft green calico that actually fit quite well, and firm instructions that all new teachers attended the first dance of the season. It is tradition, Margaret said, brooking no argument. Besides, you have been working yourself ragged. You need an evening to relax and be young. So Georgiana went and found the town hall transformed with lanterns and bunting, a small band warming up in the corner. The room was already crowded, and she was immediately swept into introductions and conversations. Several men asked her to dance, and she accepted, letting herself be spun around the floor by the blacksmith, the land agent, even Reverend Michaels, who turned out to have surprising rhythm. But she was aware of Yates the entire evening, watching from the edge of the room, nursing a glass of punch and talking to friends. He did not ask her to dance, and she told herself she was relieved. She was here as the teacher, setting an example, maintaining professional boundaries. Then the band struck up a waltz, and Yates appeared at her elbow as if summoned. "May I?" She should have said no. She should have claimed exhaustion or propriety or anything else, but she looked up at him, at those gray eyes steady and warm, and heard herself say, "Yes." His hand was warm at her waist, his other hand engulfing hers, and then they were moving, swirling across the floor with the other couples. He was a good dancer, confident and smooth, and Georgiana found herself relaxing into the movement, letting him lead. "You have been avoiding me," he said quietly. "I have been busy." "You have been avoiding me," he repeated, not unkindly. "It is all right, I understand. You are trying to establish yourself, prove you are here for serious reasons. But Georgiana, you are allowed to have a life outside the schoolhouse. You are allowed to have fun and friends and whatever else you want. I know that. Do you? Because from where I am standing, it looks like you are trying to be perfect. Trying to be exactly what everyone expects, so they will not judge you or find you wanting. But you do not have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself." The music swelled and they turned with it, Georgiana's skirts swirling out. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the words stuck in her throat because he was right. She had been trying so hard to be the perfect teacher, the perfect new resident, to prove her father wrong about her abilities. "What if myself is not enough? It will be. Trust me." He pulled her slightly closer, not improper but definitely intimate. "You have already won over half the town, and the other half is coming around. The children adore you, and I am completely smitten, so I would say yourself is more than enough." Smitten. She looked up at him, saw the truth in his face. "Yates, you barely know me. Then let me know you better. Say yes to courting. Give us a chance." The music was ending, the last notes fading away. Couples around them were applauding the band, breaking apart. In seconds, they would be just another pair of people standing in a crowded room. But for this moment, held in Yates's arms with his heart beating steady beneath her palm, Georgiana felt something shift inside her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, all right, we can court." His smile was brilliant, transforming his whole face. "Really, really, but slowly, and with the understanding that my teaching comes first. I would not want it any other way." He released her reluctantly as the next song started. "Thank you, Georgiana. You might regret it. I am fairly terrible at being courted. My last suitor said I was too opinionated and insufficiently demure." "Your last suitor was an idiot. I like your opinions. And demure women are boring." He offered his arm. "Come on, let's get some punch and you can tell me more about your terrible ex-suitors. I want to know everything I am up against." They spent the rest of the evening together, talking and laughing, and if people noticed and gossiped, Georgiana found she did not care. For the first time in her life, she was making her own choices, building her own life. And if that life included a cowboy with gray eyes and a smile that made her heart race, well, that was her choice too. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Georgiana had ever known. She threw herself into teaching, finding joy in watching her students grow and learn. Sarah Thompson learned to read well enough to tackle simple books on her own. Tommy Whitcomb stopped trying to torment Emily Parker and started bringing her wildflowers instead, a development that delighted Bessie. Even Billy Henderson grudgingly admitted he liked the history lessons and asked to borrow books about the War of 1812. And there was Yates, woven into her days like a thread of gold through plain fabric. They fell into patterns. Sunday rides out on the prairie, Georgiana on Penny and Yates on his big roan. Wednesday dinners with his parents, where Margaret fed them outrageously, and Samuel told stories about the early days of the territory. Saturday afternoons helping at the ranch, where Georgiana discovered she actually enjoyed working with the horses. He courted her properly, with attention and respect and small gestures that made her feel treasured. Wildflowers left on her porch. books he thought she might enjoy, borrowed from who knows where in this small town. Once, an entire basket of apples from a tree on the ranch because she had mentioned liking apple pie, but he also challenged her, pushed her to see herself more clearly. When she worked too late, he dragged her outside to see the stars. When she worried she was not good enough, he reminded her of her victories. When she got a letter from her father, full of disappointment and thinly veiled anger, Yates held her while she cried and then made her laugh with ridiculous stories until the pain faded. "You ever regret it?" he asked one Sunday in early October. They were riding back from a long afternoon on the prairie, the air crisp with the promise of coming winter. "Leaving Philadelphia, leaving your father." "No," Georgiana said and realized it was true. "I miss my sister sometimes, but I do not miss that life. I do not miss being someone I was not." "And here, are you who you want to be here?" She thought about it, watching Penny's ears flick back and forth. "I am becoming her. The person I want to be. It is like watching a photograph develop, slowly coming into focus. I like her. The person you are becoming, I like her too." She glanced over at him, this man who had become so important to her so quickly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For pulling me out of that river, for not letting me give up, for seeing me when I could barely see myself. Georgiana." He stopped his horse, reaching over to still Penny as well. They sat there in the middle of the prairie, grass stretching away in all directions, sky enormous overhead. "I did not make you into anything. You were always this person. You just needed space to breathe." He leaned over, slow and careful, giving her time to pull away, but she did not pull away. She met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was sweet and tender and full of promise. It was her first kiss, she realized dimly, her first real kiss, and it was perfect. When they broke apart, Yates was smiling. "I love you. I have been wanting to say that for weeks, but I did not want to scare you off. I love you too." The words came easily, naturally, like they had been waiting to be spoken. "I think I have loved you since you waded into that river to rescue my ridiculous hat." It was not ridiculous. It had sentimental value. It was extremely ridiculous, but thank you for getting it anyway. They rode home in comfortable silence, hands linked between their horses. And when Yates kissed her again outside the teacherage, sweet and lingering in the autumn twilight, Georgiana thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of challenge or difficulty, but the presence of someone who made everything feel possible. Winter came hard and fast to South Dakota. Snow began falling in November, great white curtains that transformed the prairie into an alien landscape. The schoolhouse was harder to heat, and some days attendance was sparse when families could not travel in the weather. But the children who could make it came eagerly, grateful for the warmth and the routine and the learning. Georgiana's trunk finally arrived in late November, battered but intact, delivered by a freight wagon that had been delayed by early storms. She unpacked it with Yates's help, pulling out familiar things that felt like relics from another life. Her good dresses, her books, the silver brush set that had been her mother's. She kept some, distributed others to women in town who could use them. The life she had left felt farther away than ever. "No regrets?" Yates asked, watching her fold an evening gown she would never wear in White River. "None. Though I admit this would have been useful for the dance. You were perfect at the dance. You are always perfect." He caught her hand, turning it over to press a kiss to her palm. "Marry me." Georgiana froze. "What? Marry me? I love you, you love me, we are happy together. Why wait? Because we have only known each other 7 months, so. My parents knew each other 6 weeks before they married, and they have been happy for 30 years. When you know, you know." He was smiling, but his eyes were serious. "I am not saying we have to get married tomorrow, but I am saying I want a future with you." Children, a home, a life built together. And I think you want that too. I do. Her heart was pounding. But Yates, I am the teacher. If we marry, they might expect me to stop teaching. Some communities do not allow married women to teach. Then we will make sure White River is not one of them. Reverend Michaels and the school board will listen to reason, and if they do not, we will fight them, together. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a single small diamond. This was my grandmother's. It is not fancy, but it is real, and it comes with a promise that I will spend the rest of my life making sure you have room to breathe and grow and be exactly who you want to be. Georgiana looked at the ring, then at Yates, then back at the ring. She thought about all the reasons to say no: propriety, caution, the sensible progression of courtship and engagement. Then she thought about standing in a river, reaching for a hat with a blue ribbon, and how Yates had waded in without hesitation because he saw she needed help. "Yes," she said, and watched his face light up like sunrise. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and she kissed him back with 7 months of growing love and desire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They told Margaret and Samuel that evening. Margaret cried and hugged them both, and Samuel shook Yates's hand with gruff approval. They told the town the next Sunday after church, and White River erupted in congratulations and wedding planning. Bessie insisted on making the cake. Agnes immediately started planning what Georgiana should wear. A dozen women offered their homes for the celebration, and Reverend Michaels, when approached about whether Georgiana could continue teaching after marriage, looked mildly offended that they even had to ask. "Of course you can keep teaching. We need you. The children need you. Anyone who says different can answer to me and the school board." They married on a cold December afternoon, just before the Christmas break. The church was packed with what seemed like the entire town and half the surrounding ranches. Georgiana wore a simple white dress Margaret had helped her make, with her mother's silver brush set in her hair. Yates wore a suit that made him look both handsome and slightly trapped, like a wild thing uncomfortable in captivity. But when she walked down the aisle on Samuel's arm, because her own father had not responded to her invitation, Yates's face transformed. And when they said their vows, promising to love and honor and cherish through whatever came, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The celebration afterward was loud and joyful, full of food and music and dancing. Her students gave them a hand-embroidered tablecloth they had all worked on in secret. Billy Henderson actually smiled, a real smile, and told Yates he better treat Miss Foster right or else. Tommy Whitcomb cried, which surprised everyone, and had to be comforted by his mother. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, Yates and Georgiana slipped away from the party, riding back to the ranch where they would live until spring, when Yates promised to build them a house of their own on a piece of land near the river. Margaret and Samuel were staying in town for the night, giving them privacy, and the ranch house felt enormous and quiet after the noise of the celebration. "Are you nervous?" Yates asked, helping her down from Penny in the cold barn. "A little," Georgiana admitted. "Are you terrified?" "I have been practicing what to say and do for weeks, and now I cannot remember any of it." He took her hands, his thumbs rubbing circles on her wrists. "But I love you and you love me, and I figure we will work out the rest together." They did, slowly and sweetly in the big bedroom upstairs, learning each other with gentle hands and whispered words. It was awkward and wonderful and nothing like the vague warnings Georgiana had received from married women. It was real and human and perfect because it was them, together, building something new. Afterward, lying wrapped in blankets with Yates's heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Georgiana thought about the woman she had been 10 months ago, stepping off a stagecoach with nothing but hope and determination. That woman would barely recognize her now, confident, happy, loved. A teacher, a wife, a woman who had found her place in the world. "What are you thinking?" Yates murmured, fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I am glad my hat blew off." She felt him laugh, a rumble in his chest. Best hat-related incident in the history of South Dakota. Is there much competition for that title? Probably not, but we will claim it anyway. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I love you, Georgiana Dalton." "I love you too." She smiled against his skin, testing out her new name, Georgiana Dalton. It fit like her grandmother's ring, like Yates's arms around her, like this life she was building one choice at a time. Spring came late that year, snow lingering into April, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the prairie overnight. Grass shot up green and lush, wildflowers exploded in riots of color, and the White River ran high and fast with runoff. Georgiana finished the school year with a sense of deep satisfaction, watching her students progress and grow. Several of the older ones would not be returning in the fall, moving on to work or further education, and she felt proud of what she had given them. Yates kept his promise about the house, though it took longer than either of them expected. They broke ground in May, and by late summer a small but solid structure stood on a rise overlooking the river. It had 3 bedrooms, a big kitchen with a good stove, and windows positioned to catch the morning sun. Georgiana supervised the interior while Yates handled the heavy construction, and together they created something that was entirely theirs. They moved in on a warm September evening, carrying the last of their belongings from the ranch. Margaret cried again, though she insisted it was happy tears, and Samuel gave Yates a long speech about taking care of the land and the woman in that order, which made everyone laugh. That night, lying in their own bed in their own house, Georgiana felt a sense of completion, like a puzzle finally finished. "What do you want?" Yates asked into the darkness. "From this life, from us." "This," she said simply. "You, the teaching, this house. Maybe children someday when we are ready, but mostly just this, building something real with someone who sees me. I see you." His hand found hers beneath the quilts. "I will always see you." The seasons turned, each bringing its own rhythm. Georgiana taught through the fall and winter, watching new students arrive and older ones return. Yates worked the ranch, building the herd, improving the land. They attended town socials and church services, had dinner with Yates's parents every Wednesday, helped neighbors with barn raisings and harvest. And slowly, deliberately, they built a life. In the spring of 1880, Georgiana realized she was pregnant. The signs were unmistakable. The morning nausea, the exhaustion, the way her body felt different in ways she could not quite name. She told Yates on a Sunday morning, stumbling over the words because she was nervous and excited and terrified all at once. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby, we are having a baby." "I might have to stop teaching," she said, the words bitter, "at least for a while." "So you stop for a while, and then you go back if that is what you want. Or you do not, if you decide being a mother is enough. Whatever you choose, I will support you." He set her down gently, hands framing her face. "This is wonderful news, Georgiana, the best news." She taught through that summer, though it got harder as her belly swelled and the heat became oppressive. The older girls were fascinated, asking endless questions about babies and birth. The boys were mortified and tried to pretend nothing was happening. It was awkward and beautiful and exactly right. Their son was born in November, a week before Thanksgiving, after a long labor that left Georgiana exhausted and exhilarated. They named him Samuel Michael, after both grandfathers, though everyone immediately started calling him Sam. He had dark hair like his father and gray eyes like both parents, and Georgiana fell in love all over again the moment she held him. "He is perfect," Yates whispered, staring at the tiny creature in her arms like he was witnessing a miracle. "You are perfect, both of you." "I did not feel perfect about an hour ago." "Well, you looked perfect, powerful and strong and absolutely terrifying. I am never going to cross you ever again." She laughed, which hurt, but it was worth it to see him smile. Margaret was there, having attended the birth with the practical competence of a woman who had done this before. She took the baby so Georgiana could rest, and Yates climbed into bed beside her, careful of her battered body. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what? For him? For this? For choosing me and this life when you could have had something easier." "This is easier," Georgiana murmured, already drifting toward sleep. "This is the easiest thing I have ever done." She took the winter off from teaching, focusing on Sam and recovery and learning how to be a mother. It was hard and isolating in ways she had not expected, days blurring together in a haze of feeding and changing and exhaustion. But Yates was there, taking the baby in the evening so she could sleep, walking the floor at night when Sam would not settle, learning alongside her. Spring brought new strength and a desire to return to the schoolhouse. They worked it out carefully. Margaret would watch Sam during school hours, bringing him to Georgiana at lunch for feeding. It was not perfect, but it worked. And Georgiana discovered she had missed teaching more than she realized, missed the children and the challenge and the sense of purpose. The years unfolded in a pattern of work and love and growth. Another baby came in 1882, a daughter they named Grace Alina, who had Georgiana's lighter hair and a disposition as sunny as a summer morning. She was easier than Sam, or maybe they were just more experienced, more confident in their abilities as parents. Yates expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land when it became available, building the herd into something profitable. Georgiana continued teaching, taking occasional years off for babies but always returning, because it fed something in her soul that even motherhood could not quite satisfy. They navigated the challenges of marriage and parenthood, and building a life with the same determination they had brought to everything else. In 1884, a third child arrived. Another son, Wyatt James, who was colicky and difficult and tested every ounce of patience they possessed. But he was also sweet and cuddly in a way the older two had not been, and Georgiana loved the feeling of him sleeping on her chest, his tiny hand fisted in her shirt. "3 is a good number," she told Yates one night after finally getting Wyatt down. "We have 3 children, 3 bedrooms. It feels complete. If you are sure, I would have 10 more if you wanted them." "I am very sure. 3 is perfect," and it was. Their life was noisy and chaotic and full of the mess and joy of children. Sam started school under his mother's tutelage, which was both wonderful and occasionally frustrating. Grace was already showing signs of being a handful, curious and fearless in equal measure. Wyatt grew into a happy baby who smiled at everyone. The town continued to grow around them. More families arrived, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. The school expanded, adding a second room and another teacher to handle the growing enrollment. Georgiana became something of a fixture, the woman who had started as the new teacher and become an integral part of the community. And through it all, there was Yates, her partner, her love, her home. He was there for the midnight feedings and the difficult days and the moments of pure joy. He was there when her father finally wrote, years too late, saying he might have been wrong about her choices. He was there when Samuel Sr. passed away quietly in his sleep, helping his mother through her grief. He was there for every birthday and Christmas and ordinary Tuesday, steady as the prairie itself. On their 10th anniversary, in December of 1888, they rode back to the spot where they had first met. The river was frozen now, snow covering the banks, but Georgiana could still see it. Her younger self, standing in cold water reaching for a hat, and Yates calling out from the bank. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come along that day?" she asked. "All the time. But I did come along. And you said yes to being rescued, and then yes to courting, and then yes to marrying me. And now here we are." "Here we are," she echoed, looking back at the house they had built, smoke curling from the chimney, their children inside probably causing chaos. "With 3 wild children and a life neither of us could have predicted. Do you regret any of it? Not one single moment. Not even the river." She leaned against him, solid and warm in the cold afternoon. "Especially not the river, because that is where I found you. You found yourself first," Yates corrected gently. "I just happened to be there when you needed a hand." They stood there for a long moment, watching the light fade over the frozen prairie. Then, together, they rode home to noise and warmth and the beautiful chaos of the life they had built. The children grew, as children do. Sam became serious and studious, showing an aptitude for numbers that suggested he might become a banker or accountant. Grace remained wild and fearless, more interested in horses than anything else, often found in the barn with her father. Wyatt was the dreamer, always with his head in a book, asking questions about everything. Georgiana taught for 20 more years, finally retiring in 1899 when she was 43 and feeling every year of it. Her students from that first year were grown now, scattered across the territory. Billy Henderson owned his own ranch. Tommy Whitcomb had married Emily Parker, proving that childhood torment sometimes turned into lifelong love. Sarah Thompson was a teacher herself, following in Georgiana's footsteps. The 20th century arrived with fanfare and optimism. Sam went east to college, came back with a degree and a wife, and established a bank in White River that prospered. Grace married a neighboring rancher, shocking no one, and together they ran one of the most successful horse breeding operations in South Dakota. Wyatt became a lawyer, moving to Rapid City but visiting often, always full of stories about cases and clients. And Georgiana and Yates grew old together, silver threading through their hair, their bodies settling into comfortable middle age. The ranch prospered under their careful stewardship. The house expanded with additions and grandchildren. They became fixtures in White River, the couple everyone pointed to as an example of a marriage done right. On their 30th anniversary, Margaret long dead and the children grown with families of their own, Yates took Georgiana back to the river one more time. It was April again, the same month they had met 30 years earlier, and the water ran high and cold with snowmelt. "I love you more now than I did 30 years ago," Yates said, gray hair bright in the spring sun, lines weathered deep around his eyes. "More than I did on our wedding day, more than I did when each of our children were born. You are my best friend and my greatest adventure, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "Even the difficult parts?" Georgiana asked, thinking of the years of drought, the times when money was tight, the losses and sorrows that came with any long life. "Especially the difficult parts." "Because we did them together." He pulled her close and she went easily, fitting against him the way she had for 3 decades. "I would wade into 1,000 freezing rivers if it meant finding you at the end." "That seems excessive." "Maybe, but true." They stood on the bank, looking at the water that had brought them together, and Georgiana felt the weight and joy of a life well lived. She had come to South Dakota running from one future and found another, better one she never could have imagined. She had been a teacher, a wife, a mother, and always herself. The years continued their march. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house with noise and chaos that made Georgiana laugh and feel young again. She helped raise them while their parents worked, passing on stories and lessons and love. Yates slowed down, letting Sam take over more of the ranch operations, but he still rode out most mornings to check the fence lines and cattle. In 1918, Yates passed away in his sleep at the age of 65, his heart simply stopping after a lifetime of steady beating. Georgiana woke to find him gone, and for the first time in 40 years, she was truly alone. The grief was enormous, drowning, a river of its own she had to learn to navigate. But she did navigate it, with the help of her children and grandchildren and the community she had been part of for 4 decades. She stayed in the house they had built, surrounded by memories and love. She told stories about Yates to the grandchildren who had never known him, keeping his memory alive. She lived another 12 years, watching the world change in ways she never could have imagined. Cars replaced horses, electricity came to White River, and women finally got the vote she had advocated for since arriving in the territory. She voted in every election, thinking of the young woman who had waded into a river for a hat, for her own agency, for the right to choose her own path. In the spring of 1930, at 74 years old, Georgiana Foster Dalton died peacefully, sitting in a chair on the porch of the house overlooking the White River, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Her last words were about Yates, about seeing him again, about coming home. They buried her next to him in the White River Cemetery, under a stone that read, "Beloved wife, mother, teacher, friend. She taught us to be brave." And in the years that followed, the story became legend. The new teacher who arrived in White River and went wading into the river in her good dress, and the young cowboy who called out from the bank offering help, and how that moment of connection changed 2 lives forever. Parents told it to children, who told it to their children, a story about courage and love and choosing your own path. The house still stood, occupied by generations of Daltons. The schoolhouse was eventually replaced by a larger, more modern building, but a plaque commemorated Georgiana Foster, who taught there for 21 years and inspired countless students. The river still ran, cold and fast in spring, gentle in summer, frozen in winter, constant and changing like the land itself. And somewhere, perhaps, 2 spirits walked the prairie together. A teacher who found herself in an unlikely place and a cowboy who knew a good thing when he saw it, and the love they built that lasted beyond death, beyond memory, into forever.